in this year's Knust SRC elections. And what has happened is that
Focus FM.
now there seem to be, or there is, as we know of now, there's not going to be elections for KNUST candidates or for students who are seeking to be president or executives in the KNUST SRC this year. There's been a postponement of the elections because of the COVID-19 and the difficulties or the challenges that has brought on the student and the university entirely.
3.
So this afternoon we speak to the stakeholders, all the stakeholders. Possibly we should be speaking to the dean of students as well on the show. And between now and 5 p.m., we're bringing you all the rundown of what exactly has been happening in this year's SRC elections. My name is John Essien. Remember that we're live on YouTube. You can also get onto Twitter, our social media handles, Facebook as well.
Online.
If you have any concern or any questions about this whole election and the matters that I'm sure you might have heard by now, let's hear from you as well.
Focus FM.
Okay, welcome back, and we've got some 30 minutes after 4 p.m. Now let's move on. So this year's KNUST SRC elections, that's the 2020 elections, actually was expected to have come off on the 26th of March 2020, but unfortunately the university was closed down on 15th of March this year. And what it means is that the activities within the university which affected or included the SRC elections were also unable to come off, and a lot of things have happened. Up until last week, there had been a series of meetings between the SRC Electoral Commissioner and that of the Dean of Students, the UITs, and some stakeholders as far as the elections are concerned, just to find out what exactly should be the way forward, because students were supposed to, or are definitely supposed to, vote and then elect their next executives, but it hasn't been the case because of the coronavirus and all the matters that are associated with it. Now, last week, we got the notification that the SRC president, Mr. Eduba Charles Jr., had signed an executive instrument, and what it sought to do was to establish or institute an interim student representative council committee, or a committee that would elect some students to oversee the affairs of the SRC until the next academic year is resumed for activities or the SRC to now organized elections. I'm going to take you through that very instrument. However, there's been so many questions and uproar on that because some people believe or some people argue that the SRC president doesn't have the constitutional mandate or he doesn't have the rights to sign such executive instrument, because now in the letter signed by the president, in one breath he talks about a constitutional instrument, and in another breath he talks about an executive instrument, and that a lot of people have found that to be a contradictory statement or a letter that was released there. And so I'm just going to have to take you through that, just a brief of it, what the interim committee is supposed to be. And the title of that is the Interim Student Representative Act 2020, or an instrument which entitled the Interim Student Representative Act 2020, an act to provide for the establishment of an interim committee for the purposes of student representative and organizing of the Student Representative Council elections according to Article 22, 1 and 2 of the SRC Constitution 2011 as amended. And it goes on to say that the name of the committee shall be the Interim Student Representative Council, and the Interim Student Representative Committee shall also be referred to as the ISRC for short. So the composition is going to be the Interim Student Representative Council shall be made of a 5-member comprising one, a representative from amongst elected college executives. Mind you that this year all the colleges had already had their elections or completed their elections, and there are presidents elected for the 6 colleges here in KNST. And secondly, it talks about another representative is going to be from among elected hall executives as well, and also a representative from amongst elected non-residential and the International Student Association executives as well, and then a representative from the Institute of Distance Learning, that's the ideal, and representative from the clubs and societies here in KNST. So the chairperson of the committee shall be appointed by the SRC president in consultation with the Speaker of Parliament and the Judicial Council chairperson from the representative presented under Clause 1 of the Constitution or the instrument. Well, so this afternoon I'm going to be speaking to the Speaker of the SRC Parliament, Hanvela Samoa Ajiman, and also Eduba Charles Jr., who I'm expecting them to join me shortly right here. But we'll also be speaking to some candidates in the elections to also get to know their position, because when this instrument was made known to us, a lot of them were not really happy. There seemed to be some misreactions, and their expectations were, according to them, they claimed their expectations were not what the SRC president sought to have exhibited by signing that executive instrument. And of course, so yesterday, Sunday, there was a court hearing. Apparently, a first-year agriculture student actually took the matter to court for a hearing. And what transpired was that, or what exactly he sought to achieve was to ask for an injunction to be placed on the elections or the interim committee that the SRC president signed. And so we are hearing the indication or the ruling from that very hearing yesterday was that the injunction was granted. And what it means is that we are not too sure as it stands now whether the SRC president is going to issue a statement accepting defeats of a sort. But now let's speak to one of the candidates before we get on to speak to the SRC president and the Speaker of the SRC Parliament. Mr. Samuel Sisa is one of the key candidates in this year's elections, and he's joined us on the phone lines to also get his reaction. Many thanks for joining us on the phone, Samuel Sisa. So I'm very sure that you've been following the happenings as far as the elections are concerned. Now, we're told that you held a meeting with the Electoral Commissioner and that of UITS, some members or possibly the Dean of Students, and you discussed the way forward on whether you were going to organize a delegate elections or online elections. But as it stands now, the indications or what we are having here is that the SRC president has appended a signature on a so-called instrument which is going to allow for an interim committee to be set and to constitute an interim SRC. What's your reaction on this as a candidate? Are you happy at all? Or let's hear from you.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Asian, and then good evening to all your listeners across board. I want to say a very big thank you to every Kenyan student who is out there and then continues to show the trust and belief in the leadership that I am an example of. You made some statements in your preceding question that there has been a meeting between ourselves, the UITS, the Electoral Commissioner, and possibly the Dean of Students. I want to put it on record that there has not been any meeting of that sort. The only meeting that we've had is the meeting with the PRO of the Electoral Commissioner, and then one address we've received from the Electoral Commissioner himself. The PRO of the Electoral Commissioner, that is Andrews Anochi, yes, if I'm right. He has been communicating to us verbally, virtually on our platform. And then we've also had an address from the EC, which is virtual on our platform. But then we've not had any direct contact meeting with the Dean of Students, nor the UITS personnel. Now to the issue of our reaction to the act of the president. I described that publicly once as an undemocratic process. I don't have any problem with the president finding ways and means to make sure that there is a succession plan for our student leadership. There is a succession plan for our advocacy. It is in all right things for him to take any step to make sure that our student leadership does not remain in shambles once he's leaving office, or he is going to be incapacitated to fill that particular position. But then the problem is the process to which that particular act is being done. In every year or in every election year, the major stakeholders are the candidates who have bought forms, who have through tolls, and then throughout several processes have communicated to a large majority of the students. Elections are always known to be a large collection of interests, ideas, and even investments. In the national setting, we have the committee called IPAC, which has representatives from political parties. There are general secretaries who constantly meet the electoral commissioner, some institutions like Peace Council, National House of Chiefs, and moreover, to discuss issues pertaining to the elections and then the developing issues that come up. But then this year, we don't see anything of that sort. The last discussion we had with the Electoral Commissioner, what he made note of was that with his last meeting with the UITS, they had told us on consensus that only 80% of students have been able to access the virtual class. And with those 80% of students who have been able to access the virtual class, there's a deficit of 20%. What then is going to happen to those 20%? When the school was creating the online education system, they made available some suggestions or alternatives for those people, and that was assessing the 13 ideal centers within the country to submit their work. Then it means that if the EC is supposed to organize an online elections, what is going to happen is that there are supposed to be polling station centers at all these 13 ideal places. So when he gave us that particular option on the platform, now we thought the option was going to be given to the aspirants as a major stakeholder in this year's election to make the decision as to what is going to happen next. He told us that there was going to be a referendum that was going to be conducted by the UITS to know from the student populace as to whether those 20 people should be disenfranchised or whether we should move on, we should postpone the elections to next year or have the online election regardless of these challenges that have been spelled out. Now we've been waiting. It was just about 2-3 days, then we saw the president coming out with a bill, or I don't know whether I should call it an assent or what they want to target, that there's an interim council all of a sudden, that the SRC is going to leave office and then they are going to hand over to an interim council which has a constitution or which has membership that does not include any of the aspirants, that does not include the major stakeholders in this year's election. We found that very cunning. But then we would want to see that rule of law is taking its course. And then to whichever groups that took the issue to court, I think due processes are being followed. But even though those due processes are being followed, that is not the voice of the major stakeholders in this year's elections.
Well, so that's an individual who doesn't agree to the whole decision and had taken the matter to court. But you, in your position as an SRC presidential candidate, what's your what measures or steps are you taking? Do you have any at all?
Personally, on the day the bill came out, we asked the electoral commissioner, because a night to the day the president's bill was brought to public, the electoral commissioner told us he was going to address us. Ever since, that was the address he brought out, that in accordance to the president's assent, we are supposed to buy into the idea of the interim council and then let the interim council work. What myself as an aspirant is planning to do is that we are going to follow the due processes and let our grievances be heard by the university management so that the appropriate measures will be put in place to make sure that students are never disenfranchised of their opportunity to decide who becomes their leader, and it should be done in the rightful way.
Mr. Samuel Sisa, now the Electoral Commission, after the first meeting you had, which they suggested that there was going to be, the UIT suggested that they had to come up with measures across all the IDL centers so that students will not be disenfranchised in the process. Yes.
Yeah.
So what exactly was your understanding, and is this something that you really accepted that it was a good thing in your position as a candidate?
The question again.
What I'm asking, what I want to find out is that in the first meeting you had with the EC or the SRC Public Relations Officer and then the UITS, where they brought up that some centers or ballot papers of a sort was to be made available at the IDL centers across the country. Is this something that you personally was in support of as a candidate?
If I should get you right, you're asking whether was I for that particular decision or not?
Did you support that idea?
Well, Mr. Asian, one thing I've gotten to realize in my 4 years of staying in Kenya is that even if you take a hall like Unity Hall, which has a population of about 2,000 students, if you should position about 8 to 10 computers in front of Unity Hall, the porter's lodge, or what we call the hall assistant's office, in front of that place, you will not get about 1,500 people partaking in the whole elections. It means that regardless of wherever you put a polling station, those who have interest in an election will do their possible best to partake in that elections. There have been instances in this country where people board buses from Kumasi to Accra to come and cast a ballot in national elections. There have been instances where political parties bus people to travel long distances to go and exercise their franchise.
Were you expecting same to have been done
exactly.
in this regard?
Mr.
You expected
Trust
people
me,
to have been
those
conveyed
who have
from
interest to vote. Those who have interest to vote would in every way vote. There have been a lot of public There have been a lot of public surveys conducted. There have been one conducted by the student activists of KNUST. Even the student parliament.
Do you think what you're saying was going to be ideal, considering the fact that the university or the nation in a whole is trying to prevent people from whatever activities that could lead to the spread of the virus? But you are saying that because the people can travel all the way from north to south to cast their vote in the general or national elections, then seem to be or should have been done in the SRC elections. Don't you think it's just not the appropriate thing to have been done?
Mr. Asian, if the SRC elections is online and then we create 13 polling stations across the country, this, in as much as has the tendency to spread the current virus that we are facing, the current pandemic we are facing, will not go a lengthier way to spread it at all costs. The nation has made us understand that come what may, 7th December, elections will happen, national elections will happen.
Right.
National NASPA elections has happened. A lot of elections are going on across board in the country. So life cannot come to a standstill, and election issues are issues of are delicate issues that should always have constant communication and should always not be meddled with like it is happening.
Points were made. Now, there's going to be an interim SRC that is going to be put up. You, as a candidate, what are you expecting?
In as much as we are still going to pursue the authorities for the right things to be done, if there is going to be an interim council, I expect that the major stakeholders of these elections are involved. And then if we are going to be involved, it means whatever discussions that is happening from the beginning to the end, or expectations that are supposed to come at the end, we be in the room and then we should participate in that discussion. There is no way you will be organizing an election about us, with us, and then we will not be involved in the process. Telling us 14 days into next academic year there's going to be conduction of elections,
right? And
then we, the aspirants, are standing afar, and then we are not just aspirants in this year's election, we are candidates who have bought forms and then demand involvement and then information.
Okay. Many thanks, Samuel Sisa, for your time with us. We'll definitely get back to you in a subsequent engagement right here. And this has been also, that was Samuel Sisa. Actually, he is he's a candidate, one of the leading candidates in this year's election. Apparently, he's not happy with the decision by the KNUST SRC president to set up an interim committee to constitute an interim SRC. And on that, so you can get to our social media handles. We are still taking your questions. On WhatsApp, you can simply send the message on 02488 05836, 02488 05836. That's the WhatsApp number we are accepting on the, I'm taking your messages on WhatsApp through this very number, 02488 05836. And also you can get onto Twitter and tweet at us at Focus FM KNUST. That's the Twitter handle, Twitter, not WhatsApp. So Twitter, you can get onto Twitter. The handle is at Focus FM KNUST, and we're also live on YouTube. Just go onto YouTube and you get to catch a glimpse of exactly what's happening. And finally, I have the SRC president. But before I get to the SRC president, I'm going to have to speak to Mr. Michael Jan. He is the judicial chairman of the SRC, and he's going to tell us what exactly has been his position, because I'm told that he presided over a court issue, a student's issue, a student who was seeking for an injunction to be granted on the president's decision to call for an interim SRC executives whatsoever right here. Mr. Michael Jan as JC, and shortly he should be joining us on the phone line. But anyway, let me just quickly get to the SRC president as he has joined us here on the show. And I'm going to ask him a few questions to find out from him. Mr. President, please take this seat for me so I can see you in my camera right here. But anyway, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good, and welcome.
Thank you very much.
Well, so, Mr. President, straight to the point because of time.
Sure.
What exactly have you signed to students? Have you signed an executive instrument or a constitutional instrument? What exactly do you seek to tell students?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity given, and good evening to every single student listening to me via Focus FM or watching via any of the social media platforms. These have been trying times for all of us, and especially student leaders. And for me as SRC president, I've always been forthcoming. I think in even times when students were asked to go home out of fear of contracting coronavirus, out of duty and responsibility, I had to stay around attending meetings at high levels and at low levels, making sure that student interests are always protected. Now, every single student has the right to decide who should lead him or her in a free, fair, transparent, and credible election. Now, it has been our goal, topmost goal, to make sure that such election takes place. Besides, it was the very means through which we came to this office. Now, for one reason or the other, especially due to this pandemic and the fact that students are at home, we can't have the same election that saw our victory and that saw ABC coming to office. So we decided to resort to online election by virtue of the fact that almost every single student has student portal. I believe every single student has student portal, and that just as students can access our lectures, just as we can register our courses online, just as we can do so many other things online, and especially considering the fact that the normal elections we have even been doing is partially online, because you go and do your biometric verification with some laptops, and then you vote, and then the results are recorded in a particular strong room away from the laptops. So they are technology-based elections that we have already been organized. However, due to issues that came up with respect to the virtual classes, it was not advisable for us to just stick to the online election. Issues like close to, say, 10,000 students not accessing the virtual classes, complaining of issues of accessibility, complaining of absence of internet in their various locations, complaining of inability to get smartphones or laptops, among others. I was the same person. We were the same people, these SRC people, who had to collect data from these very students, their class reps, among others, and forward it to management, stating emphatically why we should have alternative means of even submitting our assignments manually.
Well, now you indicated a certain number of students who the UIT stated had some challenge in accessing the virtual class. What percentage did they make up among the total number of students expected to vote in this year? Do you have any percentage at all?
The estimate, I don't get the question clear.
I mean, you stated there were some 10,000 students possibly who were not able to access the online.
It happened this way from the onset. You see, right from the start of the virtual classes, we had a number of students who couldn't access. Probably some of them because they hadn't made full payment of their school fees, and because of that, they hadn't registered. At that time, they were close to 11,000. But as time went on, gradually, students signed up, especially when even Vice Chancellor came up with that amnesty principle that even if you have not paid your school fees, you can sign up. However, I do not have the figures as at now.
Okay.
There are still students who had to submit their assignment manually, who had to come to campus and then see their lectures, among others, because of the inconvenience that were associated with the online stuff.
Okay.
And I believe that even if we have 1% of the close to, say, 66,000 students having accessibility issues with the online platform, it would mean that this same 1% wouldn't have the free means of casting their vote, which they have the right to in an online election. And I tell you what, during these same virtual classes, in order to solve the problem, most students do not even know how to use their student portal. So some of them forwarded their credentials, username and passwords to their colleagues, their class reps, among others, so that they could help them do the registration, at times even help them submit their assignment, among others. And even in times when students are not able to do their online registration academically from the house, they can come to Idris just here. Someone will set up a table, not a student, actually, not a lecturer, not even a member of the university community, say that he will be registering students, set up a table, and then take students' database, among others, and then register for them. Recently, I do not remember the date, but then on Jodel, which is an anonymous app, especially for users,
Well,
someone released a full list of the credentials and passwords of students.
Mr. President, so obviously you're telling us some of the challenges that for which reason you based on to arrive at that conclusion.
Yes, I'm trying to discuss the options we had and then the reasoning behind the options and why we had to come up with an interim committee.
Well.
I hope you get it. So the second option, when we realized that, of course, online is not the best, because another option that we even thought was, why don't we vote online? And just as the university has a means of submitting your assignment manually, we set up a manual form of election. But that will mean that just as the university has almost 11 ideal centers across the whole country, the EC, with its limited fund to conduct this election on campus, would have to set up manual centers across the whole region.
So that's going to be more like a national election.
More like a national election.
Going to organize a national election.
Yes, and put in strict COVID-19 friendly protocols, which we were not prepared.
Okay.
Our students were in the house, and we wouldn't like to tax them to move from wherever they are to another place in the name of SRC election and end up contracting coronavirus.
Okay. Now, one major concern that has come up actually is the fact that after you signed that instrument of a sort, so some of the students have a lot of the students, what we have observed so far, are not really happy. They claim you didn't, or the SRC didn't consult them in any means, but you only just sat in your corner and then came up with that very decision without even consulting them.
Yes.
Did you in any way consult a student of any kind?
You see, we are in a democracy, and then everyone has the right to share his opinion. But the truth of the matter is that when we had exhausted all other opinions, all other options of delegate election, of virtual class of online e-election, even some people were even recommending that we appoint or say bring the SRC in itself would decide among the candidates and select. When we have exhausted all of these and we are left with just one, okay, it is incumbent on me as a student leader, as the SRC president, to make a simple decision, which to me, excuse me to say, is common sense, that we put in this committee, handle issues for now, till school resume.
So you were just in the hurry to hand over to the next SRC executives or the interim SRC council. But the question has been that, did you follow due diligence, the processes, the due processes to come up or to sign this very instrument that we have now?
Yes, it wasn't done only by Eduban Charles. Yes, I'm the SRC president, but then never will I sit alone to do this. Besides, I have little expertise in even drafting an executive instrument. It has to come with legal backings and all those things. We did all necessary.
So by what legal did you consult the SRC?
We have the SRC Legal Affairs Commission. We had members of the SRC Judicial Committee even present to help us come up with the various parts of the instrument. We had even members of management being consulted. We also made sure that we did due diligence with the SRC Constitution in itself.
Yes.
Because we had to even go the extra mile of consulting the university legal team. You see, so that in the end, whatever decision we take, it wouldn't be legally wrong.
Okay, so you've indicated that you consulted certain stakeholders.
Yes.
But one key institution or entity within the SRC that one would expect that at least they should have an idea of whatever bill as the SRC Parliament. Did the Parliament really get to talk about this issue or deliberate or discuss it of a sort before you appending the president appending a signature to approve it or to assent your signature or to assent that bill?
The speaker is here, but before he even speaks, honestly, you see, we decided to make it an act before we changed it into an instrument. Reason is that we had exhausted all other means, and that this is what we had to do. Not just because I was in a hurry, but because the academic year has ended for students. And luckily for me as SRC president, as a member of the University Council, my tenure ends at the end of July. So in as much as the average student had completed his academic year, I just have some few days hanging to make sure that I successfully transition the SRC to students. But when we sent the issue to Parliament, the debate was too much, and then Parliament was not able to arrive at a conclusion.
Okay.
So, in such emergency instances, it is incumbent on the president to exercise his discretionary powers, and I won't say veto powers, but then it is incumbent on me to state emphatically.
In that instance you're referring to, is it stated in the SRC Constitution as part of your free will or mandate to, in such instance where you don't have conclusion being drawn from all quarters, you, the SRC president, has the power to sign for such instrument to be in operation?
You see, as SRC president, you attend council meetings. You alone would be the undergraduate student over there. You attend academic board meetings. You alone will be the undergraduate student over there. At times, you attend welfare board meetings. You alone, at times too, will be the students over there. Okay. See, in times like this, you wouldn't have to go back and consult Parliament, whatever, to make some quick, sound, and reasonable decision. These are the reasons why students would vote for you. Okay. That they entrust their powers of decision making in your hands as SRC president. Well, I hope you get it. So, yes, it would have been much more understandable if Parliament had arrived at a unanimous conclusion to uphold the decision from the executive. But then we didn't want it to look like we are playing politics with it, because we wanted
but going through Parliament isn't politics, is it?
The Speaker would talk much about what happened during that process. But the point is, see, we have just two options as at now. Today's date is
so 6th of July.
Yes, we have two options. Either we stick to the interim, or the SRC, we would leave school as usual, and then it will go into the hands of the Dean of Students and the Vice Chancellor, which is provisioned in the Constitution.
Okay. To appoint.
To appoint in consultation with all GCRC executives and college executives.
So what that means that if that happens, it means there's not going to be any elections again this year.
Yes. But then considering the interim that I signed as president in consultation with all relevant members of the SRC, we stated that this is an interim. Interim is just for a temporal time. Okay. This is not the first time. We did the same thing at Obuasi. When students came to campus fresh, they needed student leaders. We didn't have to conduct, say, a general election over there. We just went there, selected some interim leaders to act until we have free, fair, credible elections. So we made it clear to the students over there, these are interim leaders. So similarly, we need interim leaders over here in these times, especially when college presidents have been elected, all presidents have been elected, ISA executives have been elected, all members of the next parliament has been elected. So what should stop us from coming up with an amalgamation of credible student leaders who have been elected through regular franchise of students to represent as SRC?
Okay. Now, on that note, let me just go to the Speaker of Parliament, Hanvela Asamoah, Honourable. Hanvela, I'm going to ask you why you didn't call your members to, or whether you noticed that there was the need for you to even sit on this matter or whatsoever. But before that, we've got some few minutes to 5 p.m. I've got lots of your comments on YouTube. I'll come back later on and read them. You can also join us. We're also live on TuneIn, so you just have to search for Focus FM KNUST or Focus FM Kumasi, and you get to catch the interview live on TuneIn as well. Many thanks for joining us all the way on YouTube and on our social media handles. Now, the conversation we're having so far is where we have got into as far as the KNST elections is concerned. Now, the SRC president last week appended a signature to approve for a certain committee to be set, which is going to constitute an interim SRC. And as he's been explaining to us, if that option was not followed, now it was going to be left in the hands of the Dean of Students or the Vice Chancellor to appoint the next SRC executives. Yes.
GCRC executive. GCRC is the junior common room members, GCRC executive, and all college presidents.
Okay, so in consultation of all these people.
Yes, exactly. That is how the process would. They would appoint, and it would mean there wouldn't be an election.
Okay.
It is embedded in the constitution.
Sure. And that's very much going to be like what happened in 1957 when, Mr. Kondia, the first SRC president, at the time, I'm told that he was not elected. He was just appointed by the vice chancellor. And even that,
Yes,
he was not even
Kunwa
recognized
Afapa.
on the University Council at the time.
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Hanvel Ajiman, Speaker of SRC Parliament, did you notice or did you receive any bill? And what did you do?
Okay, Mr. Asian, thank you for bringing us on this show today. I would say that this parliament, as usual, has some of the hardworking members, this batch of executives or leaders in KNUST. So I think we received a proposal from the Legal Affairs Commissioner, and when I received the proposal, I put it on the floor. Then I invited the Legal Affairs Commissioner to come and then clear the doubts and then skepticism from the members of Parliament. So he came and then he answered every single question that they had. And after that, we excused him. So the moment, it means that a bill was tabled on the floor of Parliament. Looking at this circumstance, we were doing it on a virtual circumstance. And at that juncture, we started with the process, and then we even started with amendments. We had if I remember clearly, we have like 13 different amendments. And the next day, when we were about to vote, you see, people do not understand how government runs. You don't have to pass bills and send it to the president, and you don't have to ambush the president all of a sudden with decisions and then expect him to sign, because he would need some time to peruse and then go through. So I gave the SRC president the courtesy, and I called him, and I explained the amendments we had made to the original bill tabled before the parliament. Right. So when I did that, the president agreed with 12 of the amendments we had made. Then he said he disagreed with one single amendment because he felt if we had not done that, or if we did not reverse that particular amendment, it would be a problem. It would turn this thing into a circus. Yeah, it would turn the interim committee into a circus. Then when he said that, I made the parliamentarians aware that the president said he disagreed with one element or one clause of the amendments we had done, but then he agrees with the 12 other amendments. And this is government. We compromise. So I made my parliamentarians aware that we should try and compromise. But looking from their perspective, and I duly understand them, because from our perspective, we also felt that that particular amendment should stay, the one that the parliament had decided should stay. So then it became a struggle, or we came to an impasse between the executive and then the parliament. But then the constitution says clearly that after a bill has been passed, it must be sent to the SRC president. So after I spoke with the SRC president and made the position of the parliament to him, he really understood us, but then he also felt that this thing would probably lead into a circus. He had been reiterating the position that he didn't want it to lead into a circus. So he consistently tried telling me, and I said, Mr. President, look, this is a situation we find ourselves. The parliamentarians are not agreeing, and then you are also having a different perspective. So we are definitely at an impasse. So I told the parliamentarians that the president is saying that if we do not agree, then he does not see the need for the bill to be a circus going back and forth while we are in an emergency situation and then something needs to be done. So then he would not want to use the first or the most popular or the most traditional way of passing a law, but then he would want to usurp an emergency power. That is, he felt that in this time of the crisis of the coronavirus, or in this time of the world where every single world leader is scrabbing to find a solution or to some of these things, then he would want to use the alternative from the traditional way of getting the thing done. So I made the parliamentarians aware of what is at stake.
But that made it unconstitutional, isn't it?
You see, what we don't do as parliament is decide what is constitutional and unconstitutional. If there is a dispute between us and the executive, there is one arm that does that, and then I think the SRC Judicial Committee does that. And when, you see, the SRC president is someone who really likes dissent a lot. He always encourages that, alhamdulillah, if your parliamentarians disagree on something, you have to use the right way. I am not saying you can disagree with me, but you guys, so it was an impasse. It was like he had a different perspective, and we as parliament also had a very different perspective. And then at that point in time, there was a a struggle, and then there was only one arm who could litigate it. So after the president pulled the bill from the floor, Parliament cannot force the executive to continue with a bill they do not want to pursue. So the president used something he felt was an emergency instrument or an executive instrument for that purpose, which has been well litigated and then declared by the Judicial Committee.
Okay. So, very hard to understand everything you're saying here.
Exactly.
The basement or the bottom line of everything you are saying is that Mr. President just signed that because, and obviously that was out of constitution. Now there's an issue or a student took the matter to court yesterday, and I'm told that there was a ruling that came that he sought to grant for an injunction to have been granted, and that ruling was or the injunction has duly been granted. So what's going to be the next line of action? But before I get to Mr. President, you as the Speaker of Parliament, now I'm sure that you are very much aware and you've come to your senses that this was not due processes or were not followed. Are you willing to go back to Parliament and start the whole processes again, that you would let your people debates on the matter and they come to a conclusion before the president now comes to append his signature on the whole issue?
Asian, exactly what you said. Look, yesterday I stood and then I stayed and then I listened to every single argument by the respondents and then the petitioners. I listened very clearly to the ruling. In the ruling, I learned that Parliament had been given a 24-hour period to reconsider the bill that we were passing.
Okay.
But as I would say again, Parliament will do our job. We have done our job. We will continue, and then we would never be shy away from doing that particular job. But then there is a clear difference of powers. We pass the law, we forward it to the executive, and then they assent, or the president make sure he assents, and then it becomes a law. We wouldn't want to make that determination for the president. We would take the decision. Yesterday we released a statement to that effect. Today we have started the process of reconsidering the bill. We are doing some amendments, and then we have started the voting all online. So maybe some few minutes you hear the news.
Interesting.
From
So
Parliament.
obviously, what the president signed last week it doesn't hold now as we speak, does it?
Yes.
It doesn't hold.
I mean, from the perspective of Parliament, we now have something we are supposed to work with. So we now
when
are
you're
working
done, you
with.
would now have to sign again.
When we are done, we would have to forward it to him.
Great.
To consider.
Great.
Signing.
I'm gonna have to pick these comments coming from my friend. So he's a colleague of mine. He is at University of Ghana Radio University. And Manuel Cranton sent in this one. He said, is ABC saying he used his discretionary powers to decide on a matter as sacred as who gets to represent students? Does he understand discretionary powers, and when they are invoked, why does he think the Constitution made it mandatory for him to go to Parliament for the act to be promulgated? The logic he's expressing essentially is that whenever a president goes to Parliament and things don't go his way, he can use backdoor means to still push his plans. That is via discretionary powers. Well, the attitude is not only an affront to constitutionalism, but it snacks on imperialism and despotism, and also straight dictatorship. Well, he should not be speaking like that. And this is coming from Manuel Cranton. Manuel Cranton is the host of the Universe Breakfast Show. Many thanks, Manuel, for your comments. I'm sure you know him. Okay, now let me pick a few of the comments before we wrap up on YouTube. Dozens of them. You backstabbed the people you swore to advocate for when the challenges with e-learning was magnanimous by your silence. Well, ABC, can you stop talking about the e-learning because you didn't do anything? No, I'm not too sure that you are right on that. Well, so the Afro man sitting close to no. Okay, so what exactly is Deputy Properties Manager what exactly? I'll come back to that comment. What exactly is the deputy properties manager and Osophagus doing there? Chief of staff who can't. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't go. I mean, I can't take these comments on air. Okay, when a lion surrounds himself with sheep for a long time, he begins to think like them. So, what happens when sheep surrounds himself with chicken, brained goats? Well, I don't know what you mean, but we dissociate ourselves from that if you mean so hard. Limited funds, you say, we need a figure. But you don't believe that it's going to be so much expensive should the SRCEC organize that nationwide elections? I'm afraid our time is up. We have to wrap up. But I hope we'll get some more time, hopefully tomorrow, to discuss this matter in fall, because we also need to hear from the dean of students, his position, and also the candidates and some other key players in this as well. So, Mr. President, we'll have to end here.
Can I give
yes, wrap up.
Also? Okay, so colleague students, it has been like I said a tough time for all of us. In as much as everyone is in the house, we are still around trying to make sure that everything is addressed as it should be to meet the general interests. Now, we have not and we would not shiver from our mandate to protect the interest of the students. But then, like I said, the election would come off. Everyone has the right to vote. That is exactly what we're going to do. Okay. But until conditions are circumstanced to make sure that happens, we will still need an interim executive committee. My fellow, my colleague candidates, I respect you so much and I cherish your hard work. I feel the pain and the amount you have invested in the campaign. But honestly, if you have any shabby election and then it does not go your way, you are going to come back lambasting the process we use. So respectfully and in all humility, any student who has a genuine heart for interest of students should humbly side with us as we stand for the interim SRC committee. We are opening arms for recommendations among others, but then until further notice, we are going to stand with it. That is the position of the SRC executive. And after that, when school resumes, like we said, within just 14 days, you would have your SRC election, and the interim committee after the election, within 7 days, would have to hand over and relinquish everything to the truly and properly elected SRC.
Okay, so essentially, all that you're saying is that even though there seems to be some disagreement on the process, it's still in the best interest of the students.
Yes, that is what we do.
Should the matter get to that point where VC or anybody has to appoint, then it means that it goes out of the control or the inclusion
it is
of
constitutional.
Yes.
There's also constitution, but then
exactly.
I wouldn't advise students to, but
okay.
I think we should just stick.
So obviously the interim committee is the best option now.
Yes.
Okay, Hanvla, your last option, because we've been given 2 more minutes to.
Okay, thank you. I would want to say one last thing to every single student out there. That self-correction is the best remedy for progress. And then in Texas, they have this adage. They say, if you have the law, you hit hard on the law. If you have the fact, you hit hard on the fact. But you have nothing, you bang the table. That is why I'm saying, shout out to Ope. Ope is a very good friend of mine. Ope, I greet you.
Kweku.
Office constructed.
Oh, you're going to cut short for your newly constructed office. Hanvela, Kweku Sego on YouTube says Hanvela shouldn't be allowed to sit on the matter in Parliament. He clearly doesn't respect the parliamentarians. It's okay. Okay, thank you very much. And this is where we draw the curtains down on this very special edition of Election 360. If the needs be, we're going to come your way some other time with. We're going to come your way some other time with all the discussions as we wait for the Parliament to go through the processes again before the SRC President now assents his signature for the executive instrument whatsoever to be amended or to be or to come into fruition. But as it stands now, there's not going to be elections. The interim committee to constitute an interim SRC is still going to hold, and 14 days after the reopening of school or academic activities in KNUST, there is then going to be a proper SRC elections to be organized. My name is John Essien. Many thanks for joining us on YouTube. Our channel is at Focus FM KNUST. Make sure that for those of you who are watching, make sure you do subscribe and also share as well. Thank you. And up next, Technocrats. Mamiajwa is...